The White House says the Iran war is over. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says energy prices are up almost 11% in a year. Both of those statements are on the record. Both of them came from the same federal government. Only one of them shows up on your credit card. On May 1st, the Trump administration sent a letter to Congress. One sentence in that letter said this, and I'm quoting from the Reuters report: "For war powers resolution purposes, the hostilities that began on Saturday, February 28th, have terminated," end quote. That sentence ended the legal argument. It did not end the bill. Today, I want to walk you through what that bill actually says. The number on it is $4.39. The headline number on the casualty list is 13. And there is a smaller number, 15, that the Pentagon would prefer you not see. By the end of this video, you will know 3 things. You will know how a single letter rewrote the rules of war powers. You will know which line in your own household budget that letter is showing up on right now. And you will know what to watch for in the next 2 weeks. I'm Sarah Ellison. This is the Ellison Brief. Let me start with the facts on the ground. On Friday, May 1st, hours before a 60-day clock under the War Powers Resolution would have forced Congress to vote up or down on whether American forces could keep fighting in Iran, the administration delivered a letter. The letter, as reported by Reuters and the Associated Press and PBS NewsHour, declared that there had been no exchange of fire between United States forces and Iran since April 7th. Therefore, the letter argued the hostilities had terminated. Therefore, the 60-day clock did not apply. Therefore, no vote was required. The letter is short. The implications are not. Now, here is the steel-manned version of the administration's case, and I want to give it to you directly because I think the strongest argument deserves to be heard before the data answers it. The administration's position is that a ceasefire took effect on April 8th, that no American service member has been struck in combat since, and that under a reasonable reading of the War Powers Resolution, a war that has stopped is no longer a war that requires authorization. That is not a frivolous argument. It has been made by lawyers who are not partisans. I am going to put a different argument next to it. 2 days before the letter, on Wednesday, April 30th, Senate Republicans blocked a War Powers Resolution introduced by Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. The vote, according to Breaking Defense, was 47-53. Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania crossed over to vote with the Republicans. The Guardian's coverage of that vote noted that this was the 5th time since the war began that the Senate had refused to take a binding stance on the conflict. So the sequence is this. Congress was asked to vote. Congress declined. 48 hours later, the administration declared the war over by letter. The vote that didn't happen and the letter that did happen are not unrelated events. They are the same event separated by 2 business days. Follow the chain. Because what was avoided in that 2-day gap was a roll call where every senator's name would have been recorded next to a yes or a no on whether American troops had legal authority to fight a war that had already killed at least 13 of them. That roll call is what the letter replaced. Now follow the chain a second time, because the war that was administratively terminated on Friday is, on the receipt, still being paid for on Monday. Here is what I mean. I pulled the 8AA national average from gasprices.aaa.com. The number as of May 1st is $4.39.2 per gallon for regular. That is the highest sustained national average since the spring of 2022. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics' March 2026 Consumer Price Index release, the energy index rose 10.9% year over year. Gasoline alone was up 21.2%. The Joint Economic Committee's inflation update, citing the same BLS table, put energy inflation at 12.53% over the 12 months ending March. Those are not forecasts. Those are last month's numbers on the federal government's own letterhead. Translate that to a household. The average American driver covers about 12,000 miles a year at roughly 25 miles per gallon. That's 480 gallons of gasoline. The 2025 national average was about $3.07. The current average is $4.39. The difference is $1.32 per gallon. Multiply it out. That is approximately $633 per driver per year. For a two-driver household, you are looking at roughly $1,260 in additional fuel cost per year. After tax, that is the receipt. And the receipt does not care that the war was terminated by letter on Friday afternoon. Now, gasoline is the visible bill. There is a second bill, less visible, that is being printed right now in the spring planting season. Iran is one of the world's largest exporters of urea fertilizer. Urea is manufactured from natural gas. When the Strait of Hormuz seizes up, and it has, Iranian urea stops moving, Gulf ammonia stops moving, and the substitute supply has to come from European producers who run on natural gas that is itself more expensive because of the same crisis. According to a Monday note from Oxford Economics Alpine Macro Group cited by CNBC, urea prices have surged roughly 50% since the war began. The American Farm Bureau Federation's own member survey, which I read this morning, put the urea increase at 47% month over month, the largest single-month jump in the history of their tracking. DTN, the Agricultural Data Service, reported the average urea price at $720 per ton. That is the central number of this video, and I want you to hold on to it. $720 per ton of urea, up from a 2025 baseline closer to $450. That extra cost, $50 to $80 an acre on corn, depending on yield assumptions, is being absorbed right now this week by farmers who are putting seed into the ground for the August harvest. The pass-through to your grocery store on the typical 4 to 6 month lag lands in late summer and fall. That is when ground beef, eggs, chicken, and bread will start to reflect what happened in the Persian Gulf in March. The USDA's 2026 food price forecast, issued in February, projected grocery prices rising 3.1%. That forecast was issued before the urea spike. It will be revised. Here is the chain in one sentence. A war that the administration says is over on Friday raised the price of a bag of fertilizer in Iowa on Monday that is going to show up in a Cincinnati grocery aisle in October. The policy was sold as protecting American interests. The receipt shows it was paid for by American households. I want to stay in the supply chain for one more minute because there is a number here that nobody is putting on television. According to Howden Ray, that's the reinsurance broker that publishes the most detailed marine war risk data, the war risk insurance premium for a tanker transiting the Strait of Hormuz before the war was about 1/10 to 1/8 of 1% of the vessel's value. As of late March, it was 2 to 3%. The change, in Howden Ree's own words, is 1,000 to 2,400%. On a single tanker valued at $250 million, that is a hull war risk premium of roughly $7.5 million per transit. Reuters reported on April 27th that only 11 vessels had moved through the strait in the previous 24 hours, down from a normal flow closer to 50. Every one of those tankers carries product that is priced into Brent crude, into European TTF gas, into ammonia, into urea, into the diesel that moves ahead of lettuce from California to your supermarket. The strait is not closed, but the strait is, functionally, a choke point that the global economy is currently routing around. And every dollar of that rerouting is a dollar that lands somewhere on a household budget, including yours. Now, let me show you what officials said versus what the data shows, because this is where the steel-manned counter-argument gets its full hearing, and then the data answers. The administration's argument, in its strongest form, is this: the strikes worked. Iran's nuclear program was set back. The ceasefire held since April 7th. American casualties were minimized. The economic disruption is a short-term cost for a long-term strategic win. And the legal question, whether Congress authorized this, is a procedural detail that a war powers letter resolves cleanly. That argument deserves a serious response, and here it is. According to the Wikipedia compilation of public Pentagon and CENTCOM releases, cross-referenced with NPR and New York Times reporting, at least 13 United States service members were killed and 381 were wounded in the 40 days following the start of hostilities on February 28th. Those are not anonymous numbers. NPR has reported the names: Captain Cody A. Cork, 35, of Winter Haven, Florida; Sergeant Declan J. Cody, 20, of West Des Moines, Iowa; Specialist Ariana Savino, 31, killed on March 12th in western Iraq. The Pentagon released their names because the Pentagon, by law and by tradition, releases the names of service members killed in action. But on April 22nd, The Intercept published reporting by Nick Terse, and I read the original article this morning, that the Pentagon altered its tally of Iran war casualties. The Intercept's reporting was direct. 15 wounded service members scrubbed from the official count. A source described it on the record as the definition of a cover-up. The Pentagon has not, to my knowledge, as of this recording, offered a substantive explanation. So here is the gap. The headline number, the one quoted in administration briefings and on Sunday political shows, comes from a list that has been edited. The actual number, the killed in action figure of 13, the wounded in action figure of 381, plus the 15 The Intercept says were removed, is on a different page in a different document attributed to different reporters. The administration's argument that casualties were minimized depends on which casualty list you are reading. And the casualty list that the public sees is not the casualty list that the Department of Defense started with. That is the gap between what officials said and what the data shows. The war that was terminated by letter on Friday produced wounded service members on Saturday, on Sunday, in March, in April. Some of them are on the list. Some of them, according to The Intercept, are not. And the policy that was sold as protecting American families was on the receipt, paid for by them. I want you to think about something for a moment. The 15 scrubbed wounded assume The Intercept's reporting holds up. The Veterans Affairs lifetime cost for a single combat wounded service member with traumatic brain injury or limb loss or severe burn injury runs, according to multiple Congressional Research Service estimates, between $1 and $3 million over the course of that veteran's life. 15 service members at the midpoint is roughly $30 million in unfunded VA obligation. The war is officially over. The bill for the people who fought it will be paid for the next 60 years by the same taxpayers in the same households who are also paying $4.39 at the pump. So what happens next? 3 things to watch. First, the next CPI release lands on May 13th. That is the first reading that will capture a full month of post-ceasefire pricing. If the energy index drops sharply, the administration's argument that the war's economic cost was transitory gets a piece of evidence behind it. If it doesn't, if gasoline stays above $4 and food inflation keeps climbing through the summer, the receipt is structural, not temporary. Second, watch the EIA Weekly Petroleum Status Report, which lands every Wednesday. The most recent report for the week ending April 24th showed gasoline inventories down 4.6 million barrels. That is a tight market heading into summer driving season. Third, watch Congress. Specifically, watch whether a single Republican senator picks up the casualty list question. If even one senator demands a Pentagon accounting of why 15 wounded service members were removed from the public count, this story moves from The Intercept to a hearing room. If no senator does, the story dies. And that, more than the May 1st letter, is what will determine whether this war is actually terminated or simply unwritten. Here is what I want you to take away. The Trump administration declared the Iran war over by letter on May 1st. That declaration was legally sufficient to avoid a vote. It is not factually sufficient to avoid a bill. The bill is on your gas pump at $4.39 a gallon. It is in your grocery store, arriving in October, priced into a bag of urea fertilizer that costs $720 a ton. It is in a casualty list with 13 names on it and possibly 15 names not on it. The avoidable decision point was the vote that didn't happen on April 30th. 47 senators tried. 53 said no. 2 days later, the letter went out. And here's the question I want you to sit with. If the war is over, why is the receipt still arriving? Drop your zip code in the comments and what you paid for a gallon of regular this week. I read every one. If this analysis is the kind of work you want more of, the subscribe button helps the channel reach more people who are tired of the spin. That's the brief. I'll see you on the next one.